Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right, welcome in. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is really important. I want to talk about evaluating information and how to know whether or not the information that you're getting is going to be something that you can actually apply to your situation. So, what made me kind of think of this recently is I was having a conversation with somebody, actually two different people, and they were having some relationship trouble. Not them specifically, but kind of their friend group. There was 4 or 5 of them that met regularly, and out of those 4 or 5, 3 or 4 of them were having quite a bit of relationship issues. One of them was going through a breakup, 2 of them were going through a divorce, and just the way they talked about things, it was just really interesting to listen to. It was a completely different perception of just kind of how a marriage should work than how I view it and things like that. And so they were talking about how they meet together, and they created a PowerPoint presentation to go over some things. And I started laughing because if you've ever seen the movie Couples Retreat, where Jason Bateman's character, he and his wife, who Kristen Bell plays in the movie, they create PowerPoint presentations, and Vince Vaughn, John Favreau always joke around about him creating a PowerPoint presentation. So that's what made me think of immediately. So I was having a little trouble, staying serious through the conversation. But apparently they made a PowerPoint presentation about what a healthy relationship should look like. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool. You're helping your friends out and things like that. That's awesome. And then we started talking a little longer, and I didn't know this person very well. I had just met him, and so I was like, yeah, how long have you been married? And they said 6 months. I was like, oh, okay, which is great. They're trying to help other people, but somebody who's been married 6 months obviously doesn't have as much experience as somebody who's been married a year, compared to somebody who's been married 6 years, right? Compared to somebody who's had a great relationship for 30 years. And it made me think of like fitness coaches, right? If you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, you do all these things to try and find information, to try and find knowledge to apply to your own situation. And a lot of times we don't know the value of the information, right? To be honest, the majority of the information you get, the most simple advice is the one that's going to work the best. But we don't want to hear that, right? That's hard to hear, right? How do you get up earlier in the morning? You go to sleep earlier at night, right? How do you stop eating foods that are tempting you? You probably shouldn't have them around you as much, right? Some of these things are just very simple things, right? How do you get more done throughout the day? Attack your calendar, plan. But a lot of times we want to look for something different, right? And so on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok, on all these things, there's a lot of influencers that will pop on there, and they will come up with this new workout plan or this new diet or this new approach to do something, and we latch onto that because some of it makes sense, right? And the part that maybe doesn't really make sense, it's so unique, it's so new, that maybe they figured something out, right? And if they figured something out, I got to try it, right? And so that's what happens with keto. That's what happens with, intermittent fasting. It's not that these things are unintentionally, or sorry, it's not that these things are inherently bad for you, right? Or wrong. They have their place, they have their benefits, but the value of the information doesn't necessarily apply to your situation. And so when you're evaluating fitness information online, it's worth doing a little bit of research into who you're getting it from. right? There's a lot of people. I mean, I can give you a list of people who I think are really great, who give a ton of great information online. And some of them have incredibly small followings. Some of the best coaches I know have very little followers. And then there's a lot of great coaches who have huge followings, So the following, the number of subscribers doesn't really necessarily matter how great the information is. What matters is the quality of the information, right? But there's lots of things people can do to grow their follower account to become famous. And when somebody has, a big follower account, it's easier to assume, yeah, they must know what they're talking about. We look at athletes, right? I think of this every time there's like an election, an athlete will endorse a candidate, or even things like vaccines and stuff. Somebody will endorse it and stuff, and I'm thinking, in my head, it's hard for me to understand sometimes, like why do I care what the star of the football team thinks about politics, right? Why am I swaying my vote based on them, right? Because I don't know how much they know about politics. All I know is that they're good at football. But that's what people do all the time, right? That's what happens with fitness information, right? I don't want to single anybody out, but there's tons of athletes who will give you fitness information, and sometimes it's really great, and sometimes they were successful despite their poor knowledge that they have, right? A lot of times, over the years, I've worked with where I live. I live in a military town, and so a very very transient. There's a college here, military base close by, and so lots of people come and go. And I've worked with lots of military personnel, and sometimes, not all the time, I will work with clients who were in the military for years, and then when they get out, they struggle to stay consistent with fitness. They struggle to stay consistent with exercise because they didn't really know or understand what they were doing. They were in really great shape, but they were just doing what they were told. They never actually got the knowledge and stuff. And so this happens sometimes online, right? There are people who have a six pack. There are people who look great with their shirt off. And so we assume they know what they're talking about. But just because somebody got results doesn't mean they're able to teach you, right? And so it's worth doing a deep dive into the information, right? Would you rather have somebody who's been in the fitness industry for 6 months coach you, or somebody who's been in the fitness industry for 15 years, right? And so I think it's worth, if you're thinking about hiring a coach, if you're thinking about getting started, working out regularly, and maybe you're looking for a coach online, maybe you're looking for a coach in person, it's worth doing a little bit of research. I think it's something that kind of gets not talked about a ton, because there are a lot of people online who, even those in the fitness industry who have been around for a long time, they don't give great advice. But it's hard to know. More often than not, the advice that you're getting is probably okay for most people. Most of it's not harmful, but some of it can be. And the chances of, kind of spinning your wheels and not actually getting results are much higher if you hire somebody or you take advice from somebody who hasn't been in the game, right? Somebody who's only been in the coaching world for 6 months could give incredible advice. They could be a really great coach, but they also could be lacking experience, right? Just because you've been a coach for 15 years doesn't make you a great coach. What makes you a great coach is being able to work with clients, get them results, get feedback from there, and continue to improve, right? Time doesn't necessarily make you better at anything. I mean, I'm sure you can think of somebody who's been in their same job for 20 years who really isn't that great at it. It's not time that makes you good, right? It's putting the effort, it's putting the time, it's getting the knowledge, gaining the understanding in that field, right? But I do think there is some value in understanding that, some of this does take time, right? And some of it takes, you know, taking advice from somebody who's kind of been in a similar situation as you, right? I know for me as a dad, some of the things I learn, it can be hard. it can be really hard to take advice from people who don't have kids, who have never been in a similar situation as me, right? It can be hard. I try my best to stay open minded, but it can be really, really hard to stay open minded, right? And so I think, not that you can't hire a coach who has a different background than you. Ren Jones was on this show quite a few months now, and he coaches women. He's not a dad. He's not a woman. He has no kids, and he is an incredible coach. But he's also very empathetic. He's put in a ton of time and learning as much as he can, doing as many certifications as he can to help women. And he has a really strong why behind it. He has a really strong reasoning, right? And so, um, yeah, I think just evaluating information. How do you know? Sometimes it takes trial and error, right? There are people I used to follow for advice who I realized later on that, you know what, they probably don't know as much, or aren't as honest with some of the things they're sharing as I thought they were, right? And I try and, section things off as well too. Just because I'm getting great fitness advice from somebody doesn't mean they're going to give me great financial advice. I think people sometimes can fall into that trap too. Somebody's really great at something, and so when they give advice on something else, we automatically take it as gospel, right? That happens all the time. Kind of back to that athlete example. They're really great at basketball. They must know what they're talking about when it comes to crypto, right? It's really hard to be great at more than one thing, and some people are really good at all they do. Some people, just have that drive, that work ethic. That was a tough one to say there. That allows them, to thrive in different areas. They have the passion for multiple things. But I think it's really important to not just take everything you see online, even from me. That's hard to say, right? Like I like to stay a lot pretty neutral on things, and my favorite answer on a lot of things is it depends, right? It depends, or sometimes, in some instances, things are correct, right? For certain populations, sometimes you have different medical conditions. Keto can be the best diet for you. For some people, it's going to be the worst. It's not going to be something that's sustainable. For some people, intermittent fasting works really well. For other people, it doesn't. And just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you, right? And so it always depends. That's a tough answer because we want a concrete black and white, right? But one of the easiest ways to find out if somebody is if they're trying to educate you or they're trying to sell you something is, are they speaking in absolutes? If somebody tells you never or always or this is the only way to do this, chances are there's more to the story. They're trying to sell you something, right? I always talk about, doing your best to get up in the morning to work out. But what happens if you work from 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning? You're probably not going to get up early to work out, right? You're going to sleep in, right? So that doesn't apply to you, right? And sometimes you got to take this information and apply, take what's useful, kind of discard the rest. And so a lot of times though, I like to believe that most people mean well. I I honestly believe that. I think the majority of people have the best intentions. And so just because somebody isn't right on something doesn't mean they're going to be wrong on everything, right? There's some people, like I said, I'm not going to call anybody out, but there's some people that I follow who have been in the fitness industry for a very long time, and they give a lot of good information, a lot of valuable information, but then some of the things they share just aren't aren't backed by science or more um, opinion, I guess. But they treat it like it's gospel, right? And so that can be hard sometimes because as soon as somebody kind of breaks that trust, we start to question everything that they're saying, right? And sometimes they're just honestly misinformed at times. And so, I think it's important to have a little bit of skin in the game, right? It doesn't mean coaches who are young, doesn't mean, individuals, business coaches, people who are any field that are young can't teach you something, right? I believe there's lots of value in being young, and sometimes people who are, even quite a bit younger than me, are way further ahead, way further ahead than where I want to be, and so I can learn from them and stuff. And so it's just you're picking and choosing, right? Just because somebody who is 5 or 10 years younger than me can't give me parenting advice because they don't have kids, they've never been married, right? They're not in that situation, doesn't mean I can't learn from them in another area, right? And so I think it's important that when you're taking advice to understand that you got to kind of have a filter there, right? And sometimes the advice that you get online just isn't going to work for you, right? Like back to the example, if you're working nights, getting up in the morning, probably not going to be the time you work out, right? Working on the evening is maybe what you need to do right before you start the night shift, right? If you're always running around early morning and things like that, then meal prepping may be something that works for you. If you're somebody who's traveling a lot, meal prepping may be a little bit tougher, right? You may have to get kind of creative. And so a lot of the advice you take, you kind of got to pick and choose what works for you, but understand that the value and understanding where it's coming from too. If somebody's been in your situation, then yeah, you can probably take that advice and apply it, right? If somebody's never been in your situation, then it's probably best you don't try and squeeze that into your life, right? It may be helpful, but it's probably going to be quite a bit more stressful because they don't understand your situation. And so the the fitness industry, I love it, absolutely love it. Like I said, I believe most people have great intentions. Most people have good hearts. They want to help you. I just want you to be careful. I just want you to make sure that the things you are accepting, the things that you are applying, are things that are actually going to benefit you. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.